Why was I the bad wife for having a best friend? Why was my husband allowed to call it disrespect, but I was not allowed to call it trust? I told him Noah was harmless, that he had been in my life long before marriage, and that only an insecure man would see love where there was only friendship. Then I came home laughing after a party with Noah, and my suitcases were already packed. My name is Sloane Bennett. I am 34, and I work as a senior UX research lead. The thing was, I knew how people worked, or at least that was the version of myself I liked to wear. Of course, people trusted me because I asked good questions, listened with my head tilted, and made every answer feel useful. At home, I was less patient. Marek used to say I could hear a stranger's fear in one sentence but miss his after 6 years together. He said it softly, never like an attack. That was his way. He put pain on the table like a folded receipt and waited for me to read it. Most nights, I did not. Our townhouse had a narrow hallway with a brass hook beside the door. My silver house key hung there with his black one. It was ordinary then. Shoes below it, coats above it, mail on the console table, the smell of coffee from the kitchen when Marek got home before me. We had been good once. Every Sunday he walked with me to the bakery 2 streets over. He always let me pick the croissant with the darker edge because I said once that burned almond tasted better. He remembered small things like that. I told myself small things were not the same as passion. That evening, I came home after a research review, still wearing my badge on my blazer. Noah had texted before I even took my shoes off. 3 words. 1 joke. 1 private reference from college. I smiled at my phone. Marek saw it. He asked if something had changed between us lately. Not in a loud way, not even in a jealous way. He asked it while hanging his jacket under mine, like the answer was a thing he could make space for. I told him work had been heavy. I told him he was reading into nothing. Of course he accepted that, because Marek accepted too much before he finally stopped accepting anything. Later, when we got into bed, Noah texted again. I turned the phone slightly away from Marek and answered under the blanket. 2 people in the room. 3 messages on the screen. 1 silence behind my back. By Friday, I had already decided Marek was becoming difficult. The thing was, difficult did not look like yelling in our house. It looked like careful questions, small pauses, and the way he watched my phone without asking to see it. Of course I called that control, because control sounded worse than concern. We went to dinner downtown with Tessa and Julian. The restaurant had a table by the window, the one Marek reserved because I once said I liked watching people walk by with shopping bags and dogs pulling at leashes. He remembered that too. I should have been touched. Instead, I was annoyed that remembering gave him quiet power. Noah was not there, but he was on my screen all night. He sent a photo from a bar across town, then a comment about the waiter's mustache, then a joke about how I used to grade first dates after college like I was running a field study. I laughed before I could stop myself. Marek was telling Julian about a bridge inspection delay. His voice slowed when I laughed. Tessa looked from my phone to my face. Julian stopped cutting his steak. Marek asked what was funny. Calm and specific. I said Noah had sent something stupid. Marek asked if I had heard what he had just been saying about work. I said I had, mostly. That was not true. The table changed after that. Not loudly. The fork still moved. The waiter still brought water. But Marek's hand moved away from mine on the table. On the ride home, he named the incident like he was reading notes from one of my research sessions. He said I had laughed at Noah's messages through half of dinner and stopped talking every time he asked what was funny. He asked what had happened to us because he did not remember having to compete with someone who was not even in the room. I heard accusation. I heard ownership. I heard a husband building a fence around me. I told him Noah had been my best friend since college. I told him love between friends was not possible when the friendship had survived that long without becoming anything else. I said Noah knew every bad version of me and still stayed. So maybe Marek should respect that instead of acting threatened by it. Marek said that a person did not have to touch a marriage to stand inside it. He said Noah had become the first person I told things to, and Marek had become the person who found out later. That should have landed. It did not. I told him that if Noah ever showed feelings for me, I would end the friendship myself. I said he never would. Of course Noah was harmless. Of course Marek was making it strange. Of course I was tired of explaining friendship to a grown man. The thing was, I believed most of it. After we got home, Noah asked if I could stop by because he was having a rough night. His message came while Marek was rinsing plates at the sink. Water ran over the ceramic. The kitchen smelled like lemon soap. I told Marek I needed to finish a work deck in my office. He turned off the faucet. He asked if I was going upstairs. I said yes. Then I took my laptop bag, waited 7 minutes, and left through the side door after he went to the laundry room. That was the first active lie. Not the first hidden thing, but the first one I shaped with both hands. Noah picked me up near the corner. His car smelled like mint gum and rain on leather. He grinned when I got in and said, indirectly, that he had known I would come because I always did. I liked that. I liked being predictable to him and impossible to Marek. We drove to a late bar where the lights were low and no one asked why I still wore my wedding ring while sitting so close to another man. Noah told me his client was impossible, his apartment felt empty, and I was the only person who made him feel normal. He did not say love. He did not need to. I had already built my defense around the absence of that word. 3 hours, 2 missed calls, 1 message from Marek asking if the deck was going well. I wrote back that it was almost done. Across from me, Noah laughed because he saw the message. He told me I was too good at sounding innocent. I told him not to say it like that. He raised his hands and said he meant nothing. But he did not look sorry. The next morning, Mara called while I was making coffee. She asked how dinner went, and I told her Marek had made it uncomfortable. I said he was jealous of Noah now, as if that was the most childish sentence in the world. Mara laughed. She said men always called women disloyal when they could not control them. She said a husband should be proud his wife had friends, not threatened by them. That made me feel clean again. Tessa texted later and asked if I had gotten home okay. Simple question. Too simple. I told her yes and added a smiling face. She did not answer for 4 hours. Julian stopped sending memes in the group chat that weekend. At the time, I called it coincidence. The thing was, I needed it to be coincidence, because patterns were what I studied for work. If I saw one at home, I would have to name it. Noah's birthday was on a rooftop lounge with glass railings, heat lamps, and music soft enough that every laugh still travelled. The city lights sat below us like proof that everyone else had somewhere to go. Of course, I arrived with Marek. The thing was, I did not stay beside him for long. Noah saw me near the elevator and opened his arms before I had even taken off my coat. His hug lasted long enough for Marek to shift his weight behind me. I knew that because I heard the rubber sole of his shoe drag against the floor. I did not step back. Noah smelled like cedar cologne and the kind of clean shirt people wear when they want photographs taken. He told the group indirectly that I was the one person who knew him better than anyone. Someone made a sound like a cheer. I laughed and said Marek should not worry because Noah was practically family. Marek's face did not move. That irritated me more than anger would have. Tessa stood near the bar with Julian. Mara was not there, but she was active under the tagged stories, adding little fire emojis and comments about how good I looked. Elise, Noah's on and off partner, came late and stayed near the railing. She watched more than she spoke. The first hour was easy because I made it easy for myself. I stood beside Noah when people took photos. I let him pull me into old college stories. I touched his arm when I laughed. Each small thing could be explained alone. Together they made a room. Marek came over once and asked if I wanted to sit with him for a minute. Soft, still trying. I heard embarrassment. I heard him asking me to prove something in front of people, so I told him I was in the middle of a conversation and asked him not to hover. Noah looked down when I said it, but he smiled into his drink. That smile fed me. Later, when Marek stood by the exit checking his phone, someone joked that he looked serious. I said he was practicing for his new role as my security guard. People laughed. Not all of them. Tessa's laugh stopped fast. Julian did not laugh at all. Marek looked at me then, not wounded in a dramatic way, just tired. He asked indirectly if I needed him to get anything from the car because he was stepping out. I had worn heels that were already cutting into the back of my ankle, and my flats were in the trunk. I took the silver house key from my small bag because the car key was on the same ring. I placed it in his palm and told him to bring the flats up if he wanted to be useful. It sounded funny when I said it. At least, I needed it to sound funny. The key sat in his hand under the amber rooftop light. His fingers closed around it slowly. He did not answer. He only walked to the elevator. Noah leaned closer after Marek left and said, "I was brutal." He meant it as praise. I accepted it that way. 3 witnesses, 2 phones recording. One husband carrying my flats back into a room where I had made him smaller than everyone else. When Marek returned, he placed the flats under my chair. He did not hand me the key. He laid it beside my glass on the table. Metal against glass. A tiny sound. I looked at it, then at him. For 1 second, the whole rooftop seemed to narrow around that key. I saw him standing there in his dark coat, not as a jealous man, not as a controlling husband, but as someone I had asked to serve me in front of the man I kept defending. The thought opened fast and sharp. Then Noah touched my shoulder and asked if I was coming for the cake. I picked up the key, put it back in my bag, and told myself Marek was too sensitive. The door closed that quickly. After the party in the elevator lobby, Marek asked if I understood what I had done. Quiet debrief, no raised voice, no scene. The quiet was the whole point. I told him he had embarrassed himself by acting stiff all night. He said I had made him look like an outsider in his own marriage. I said no one could make him feel that way unless he already believed it. That was cruel because it sounded smart. Outside, the air smelled like wet concrete. Marek offered to drive me home. Noah said he could take me if I wanted to stay for one more drink downstairs. I looked between them and chose Noah, not because I needed the drink, but because choosing Marek would have looked like surrender. Marek nodded once and walked to the parking garage alone. The tagged location story went up before midnight. In it, Noah and I were dancing close, and Marek stood near the exit in the corner of the frame. A man at his wife's side, except the space beside her had already been filled. Tessa saved it. I learned that later. At the time, Mara reacted with another little flame, then nothing. Her silence was small but different. I sent her a message asking if she had seen how dramatic Marek looked. She replied after almost an hour and said only that the video was a lot. A lot. Not hilarious, not iconic, not good for you. The thing was, I still had Noah laughing beside me. Of course, that felt like enough. When Marek slept facing away from me that night, I told myself he was punishing me because he had lost. I did not understand that quiet men do not always lose. Sometimes they begin counting. The week after Noah's birthday, the house developed separate weather. The hallway stayed the same, the brass hook still held our keys, and the kitchen still smelled like coffee in the morning. But Marek moved through rooms without asking for space because he had already made it. Of course, I called that peace. The thing was, peace was easier to accept than absence. Noah kept texting. Drinks became late dinners. Late dinners became rides through the city with music low and my phone face down in the console. I told myself face down was polite. I told myself unanswered calls were boundaries. I told myself a wife was allowed to breathe. 3 calls, 2 messages. 1 blue notification I watched disappear while Noah told me a story about a client who cried during a pitch meeting. Marek stopped waiting up. The first night he did that, I came home after 1 in the morning. My shoes were in my hand. The townhouse was dark except for the small lamp near the stairs. I expected him on the couch, tired and angry, ready with a question I could defeat. He was not there. His bedroom door was open. Our bed was made on his side and messy on mine. The guest room door was closed. The next morning I saw his toothbrush in the guest bathroom. White plastic, blue bristles, 3 inches from the sink instead of beside mine. I stood in the doorway longer than I needed to. The thing was, toothbrushes are not dramatic. They do not accuse. They do not cry. They do not ask where you were. They just move, and suddenly the mirror over your own sink looks too wide. For a few seconds, I saw it. Not fully. Not in words I would have admitted. But I saw the shape of a life being practiced without me. Marek was not trying to scare me. He was not performing pain. He was placing distance where begging used to be. My hand went to my phone before the thought could finish. Noah had sent a morning message asking if I survived the husband audit. I laughed once too loudly for an empty hallway and replied that the audit had moved departments. Then I put on makeup and left for work. That was how I closed the door. At the product lab, I interviewed 6 users about trust signals in a finance app. I asked when they stopped believing the screen in front of them. I asked what small details made them leave. They gave careful answers. I nodded like a priest. During lunch, Tessa called. She did not text first, which already felt serious. She asked if I was sure everything with Noah was harmless. She said the rooftop video had made people uncomfortable. She said Julian had left early because he did not like watching Marek stand alone. I heard judgment. I told her people loved making stories out of nothing. I said Noah had never crossed a line. Tessa said softly that maybe the line was not only about what Noah did. That bothered me. So I made a joke about everyone acting like I had run away to Europe with him. Tessa did not laugh. After that, her messages became practical. Links, times, group plans without warmth. Mara still answered, but slower. When I told her Marek had moved to the guest room, she said maybe space would be good. Not that he was ridiculous. Not that I deserved better. Just space would be good. Her support had started wearing a coat and reaching for the door. At home, Marek named the pattern. He said I was not choosing Noah once. I was choosing him every time answering Marek became inconvenient. He said the missed calls, the hidden rides, the jokes in front of people, and the late nights were not separate events. They were the same sentence repeated in different rooms. I told him he had become impossible to talk to because he turned everything into evidence. That was partly true. Marek did speak like a man building a file inside his head. Dates, times, names. He loved through order, and when love failed, order stayed. But I used that truth like a shield. I tried a microshift then, not remorse, strategy. I told Marek I would set better boundaries with Noah. I said I would stop answering during dinner and would tell him not to joke about Marek anymore. My voice was gentle, almost careful. I even touched Marek's arm when I said it. He looked at my hand like he was trying to remember what it meant. Then Noah called. His name filled the screen between us. I let it ring, which I thought proved something. Marek looked at the phone, then at me. He asked what would happen if Noah needed me later. I said that depended on what he needed. The answer came out before I could dress it. Marek pulled his arm away. The compromise failed in less than 1 minute. That night, he took the silver house key off the hook and held it for a while. I saw him from the living room. He rubbed his thumb over the edge, then placed it back, perfectly straight, separate from his black key. I told myself he was being sentimental. The reader of a room would have understood something else. The next Friday, Noah invited me to a private loft party. I did not tell Marek right away. When I did, I called it a small birthday after-party, which was not a lie but was not the shape of the truth. Marek asked me not to go. Not forever. Not because he owned me. Just that night. He said he was tired and wanted one evening where our marriage was not competing with another man's plans. I heard a cage closing. Of course I did. A cage was easier to fight than a husband asking to be chosen. I told Noah I would come. Inside the walls of that townhouse, something broke without making a sound. The loft party was on the top floor of a converted warehouse with brick walls and a freight elevator that shook as it climbed. Noah stood near the windows when I arrived, already holding a drink for me. The thing was, I liked being expected. Of course, I told myself that was friendship too. Before I left, Marek had been in the mudroom beside the brass hook. The silver key hung above his shoulder. His black key was gone. He asked me not to go in the same careful voice he had used all week. He said he was not asking me to end every friendship or cut off every person from my past. He was asking for one night where I chose the marriage before the performance of freedom. That was his final clean offer. I know that now because it did not come with extra words. I told him he had made every conversation feel like evidence in a case against me. He did not argue. That was the part that should have scared me. He could not refute it because it was true. Marek had become careful in a way that made love feel like paperwork. He remembered times, phrases, missed calls. He repeated details instead of saying he was lonely. Being married to him had started to feel like living under a quiet review. But one true thing does not wash the rest clean. I did not know that then. I used it as permission. I told him that if he trusted me, he would not need me to stay home. I said only insecure men turned old friends into threats. I said Noah had never asked me to leave my husband, never said he loved me, never done anything I could not explain as friendship. Marek asked if I heard myself choosing the explanation over the marriage. I told him I heard myself choosing not to be controlled. After that, he did not ask again. He stepped aside so I could reach my coat. That small movement was colder than any slammed door. It made a path for me. I walked through it. At the loft, Noah kissed my cheek near the corner of my mouth, not enough to name and too much to forget. Someone took a photo. I saw the flash, then laughed because laughing made the moment belong to me instead of to anyone watching. Noah asked if Marek knew I was there. I said Marek knew enough. Noah's smile tightened. He checked who had seen the photo before it posted. That was Noah's flaw showing itself. He liked being the exception, but he did not like being evidence. I ignored that because I had chosen the room. People drank from plastic cups that bent when held too hard. Music came from a speaker on the floor. Someone asked if Marek ever came to these things, or if I had a separate life for fun. I said with a glass in my hand and Noah beside me that Marek preferred staying home with his concerns. People laughed. Again, not evenly. A woman I barely knew asked if I was not worried how that sounded. Noah answered before I could, saying people made marriage too dramatic. He said Sloane and I had always been like this. Like this. Those two words sat between us with their shoes on the furniture. My phone buzzed. Marek calling. I turned it over. 3 calls. 2 messages. 1 silence I chose on purpose. Noah saw the screen and said indirectly that I did not have to answer if it would ruin the night. He did not say he wanted me to ignore my husband. He was too smart for that. He offered me the version of myself I wanted, the woman who could not be summoned. So I did not answer. The voluntary line was not the party. It was not the photo. It was not even the joke about Marek staying home with his concerns. It was looking at his name on my phone and deciding that making him wait proved I still belonged to myself. Near midnight, I posted a story from the loft balcony. Noah stood behind me, close enough that his reflection touched mine in the dark glass. I added no caption. I told myself no caption meant innocence. The ride home smelled like rain and old smoke from Noah's jacket. He was quieter in the car. I asked if he was okay. He said he had just been thinking that people might get the wrong idea. I laughed and asked since when he cared what people thought. He said it was different now. I heard stress. I did not hear self-protection. When he dropped me near the townhouse, he did not walk me to the door. Before, he would have. That night, he stayed in the car with the engine running and said I should text him when everything calmed down. Everything. Not Marek. Not us. Everything. I still waved. The mudroom light was on when I opened the door. The house smelled like cardboard and floor cleaner. My coat was damp at the shoulders. The brass hook was empty except for 1 key. My silver house key. Below it, beside the bench, stood 2 suitcases. Mine. the grey one with the broken side handle, and the black carry-on I used for conferences. A folded sweater sat on top because the zipper would not close around it. My makeup bag was in the side pocket. My running shoes were tucked into the front compartment. The packing was not angry. That was the worst part. Angry packing throws things. This was careful. Socks rolled into corners. Laptop charger wrapped. Toiletry bag sealed in plastic so nothing spilled. Marek stood near the stairs in a dark sweater. His face looked washed clean of argument. I asked what he was doing. He said indirectly that I had spent months proving Noah and Mara were the people I chose first, so I should call one of them now. He said he would not keep living as the person waiting in the house while I performed freedom for everyone else. I told him he was cruel. I told him he was throwing me out because he could not handle a friendship. I told him this was exactly why I had needed space. He listened. No interruption. No defense. That silence had weight. I reached for my phone and called Mara. No answer. I sent a voice message, then another, then a third. I wrote that Marek had packed my things and was acting insane. Mara reacted with a small thumbs up, and then nothing. One symbol. No words. No sister. I called Noah next. He did not answer either. A minute later, he texted that he hoped I was okay, and that maybe tonight was not the best time to talk. Marek picked up the black carry-on and placed it outside the threshold. He did not touch me. He did not raise his voice. He only made the new reality physical. I stood in the mudroom with my coat still on and my party shoes wet against the mat. The thing was, I had thought silence meant I was winning. Of course, I understood then that his silence had been the only thing in the house still moving. 3 days later, I sat in the waiting room of a mediation office with beige chairs, a water cooler, and a receptionist who spoke in a voice built for forms. The thing was, I still expected a conversation. Of course, I had told myself Marek had acted from hurt, and hurt could be managed if I framed it correctly. Then the receptionist gave me a folder with my name on the label. Inside was a petition for dissolution of marriage with motion for temporary exclusive use of the marital home. The first hearing was listed for the following Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. I read the first page twice, then placed both hands flat on the folder so the paper would stop sliding against my knees. Marek sat across from me with his attorney beside him. Tessa sat near the window holding her phone in both hands. She did not look proud. She looked tired. The attorney explained that the temporary request was based on documented conflict, housing stability, and the timeline of my repeated overnight absences. Tagged rooftop stories, the loft balcony post, messages where I said I was working while I appeared in public posts with Noah. Tessa had provided screenshots because she had watched the pattern become too large to call private. I said Marek was jealous. I said he had been tracking me like a suspect. The mediator looked at the folder and said, indirectly, that the issue before the room was not whether Marek had been hurt, but whether I had kept creating public contradictions and then asking everyone to call them harmless. There was nothing soft in that sentence, nothing cruel either. I turned my phone over when it buzzed. Noah had sent one message saying he never wanted to be involved in anyone's marriage. By the time I opened the app, he had removed the tagged photos. After that, life became smaller in exact ways. I spent 2 weeks in a motel near the highway because the temporary home order left Marek in the townhouse until the hearing. Joint account access changed, and every shared bill moved through attorneys instead of our kitchen counter. Tessa stopped covering for me. Julian stopped inviting me anywhere, and Mara answered only practical questions. Noah avoided calls, deleted tags, and told people we had always only been friends. At work, my team grew quiet in meetings because the woman paid to read people had become easy to read. Marek left first that day. Not angry, not victorious, clear. He placed the silver house key on the table instead of handing it to me, and then he walked out before I could turn the room into another argument. The thing was, I had thought keeping Noah close proved I was free. Of course, freedom had sounded better than being needed, better than being known, better than standing still long enough to be loved properly. But I used my best friend like a door and found out too late that doors can close from the other side. The silver key stayed on the mediation table. I did not lose my marriage because Noah loved me. I lost it because I kept pretending he could not.